Yeah, this comes as a surprise to a lot of people because Anthony Scaramucci was only recently installed as the White House communications director at the behest of President Trump and over the protestations of both Steve Bannon and Reince Priebus. And we saw what happened last week as a result of the lingering friction between Anthony Scaramucci and Reince Priebus, with Priebus departing late on Thursday. Well, now Anthony Scaramucci is departing as the White House communications director. Outside sources have confirmed what we already knew through other sources, that John Kelly, who is the new incoming chief of staff, requested to kind of clear the decks. And Scaramucci, it looks like, is now going to go back to the Export-Import Bank, where he was working before. He was also in line to be the ambassador to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris. We don't know if that nomination will now go ahead, but we do know that he's going back to the Export-Import Bank. What we do not know, and this remains an open question, we hope to find out soon, is does this mean that Sean Spicer is going to stay? You know, the whole hierarchy of the communications shop at the White House, Harris, was changing. Sean Spicer was going to be elevated to a position of a deputy chief of staff overseeing both the press secretary and the communications director. When Scaramucci came in a week ago Friday, for that meeting, he told the president that he did not want to report to Sean Spicer. And Sean Spicer saw this as being an untenable situation, where he didn't want to be sort of the underling in the communications shop after being with the president so long. So he tendered his resignation to sort of, as he put it, quote, clear the decks so the president could bring in his own team. But now that John Kelly has come in, we have yet another clearing of the decks. So Anthony Scaramucci, whose tenure lasted about 10 days, is out as the communications director, going back to the Export-Import Bank. And again, we will check to see if he will still be in line for that nomination to be ambassador to the OECD, and whether or not Sean Spicer will depart the White House, as was planned for probably about the 15th of August. I talked to him earlier today. He was sort of going to coordinate his departure with some renovations that are taking place in the West Wing of the White House at the end of this week. But all of that may have changed. I'll tell you that I was outside his office, and he was behind the desk on the computer as the rest of the staff were gathered around him. So his position here at the White House still very prominent. It's likely he wouldn't continue to be press secretary. Sarah Huckabee Sanders has been named the press secretary, but Spicer could well stay on as the communications director in the position that he held before Scaramucci came in. It's a very, shall we say, fluid situation, Harris, here at the White House, as we're trying to figure out what all of these moves might mean in the short term and in the long term.
Absolutely a fluid situation. A lot of questions linger, John, and we don't have hard answers, I would imagine, but you just laid out a course for who could be coming and going, filling that question of, well, who takes the post of communications director? This would have been the second person to have that job in just a couple of months. All the way back to the inauguration, you've had, you know, kind of the sharing of that position. I mean, there have been some different configurations with the job communications director that is so important and pretty singular in terms of its messaging. That person would be meeting on a regular basis with the president, and there wouldn't have been the kinds of mistakes that we've seen with communications over the last few months. But, John, what are you hearing just in terms of the morale inside the White House since Anthony Scaramucci got in there? I mean, we've heard some conflicting reports about exactly what he meant when he said he was going to clear out the leakers. Is he firing them? Is he outing them on Twitter?
Well, it kind of all depends on how much power you think the director of communications really has in the White House. You know, the power base tends to run from the president to the vice president to the chief of staff to some of the senior staff to the legal counsel, and the communications director is typically somewhere down that pecking order. But certainly when Scaramucci came in, I mean, I likened him to one of those figures that you saw back in the 1920s and early 30s that wore a nice suit and carried a Tommy gun. Not someone to be trifled with, and someone who was going to sort of, you know, stake out his territory. So I don't know exactly how far he was going to go to rooting out leakers or firing staff. There was one person who was working in the lower press office, one of the deputies, who did resign after Scaramucci came in. But now all bets are off. You know, Kelly obviously is coming in here with his own idea of a chain of command. Even Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump said at the end of last week, when he was installed, or over the weekend, I guess is more accurate, that they were looking forward to, quote, following his leadership. So it may be that Kelly said to the president, if you want me to be chief of staff, we're going to have to establish the firm chain of command here where things flow from you through me and then out to everybody else. We can't have all of these parallel lines of access going between some of the other positions and the president. It's all got to go through the chief of staff, because the position of chief of staff, Harris, really is to be the gatekeeper for access to the president.
Oh,
now,
absolutely. From the calendar to, sure, absolutely. And that was some of the reporting that had been done on Reince Priebus, that he didn't even necessarily have a real good handle on the daily calendar from this president in terms of their communication.